I got to Teen Challenge.
Well, Jessica, I'm excited to meet you, and thank you so much for being willing to jump on the Rebuilding Life After Addiction podcast. And, as we were talking offline a little bit, our hope with this entire show is to just, share the story, the story of overcoming, but really get a real look at the work that goes in, right, to rebuilding life after addiction. And for those of us who have been through residential programs and kind of done the rehab thing and all of that. Like, I think for Rob and I, Rob is my co-host, he's not on tonight, but for him and I talking about it, it's like, man, when we finally got on the other side of that recovery program, it was like, boom, life smacks you in the face. And so the hope here is just to provide some encouragement and stuff along the way. And so you want to take a moment and introduce yourself, and we'll just kind of roll from there.
Like you said, my name is Jessica. I am the program director for Saving Grace Women's Home. I've been here for 3 years in Texas. I come from Teen Challenge in California. I went through the program myself in 2014. And I stayed with them for 6 years before coming on with Saving Grace.
Wow, fantastic. So 2014, what part of California?
In the Bay Area.
Bay Area, okay, Awesome. Well, fantastic. So you were at Teen Challenge serving for 6 years prior to coming to direct the program at Project Hope.
Yes.
Or Saving Grace. That's fantastic. So you've been around the ministry for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. So tell us a little bit about your journey, right, to all of that. Like, this is a podcast about addiction, and did you go through Teen Challenge prior to becoming a staff member there?
Yes, I did.
No, I was just going to say, so what led you to Teen Challenge all those years ago?
I obviously had a drug addiction. I struggled with meth since I was 13 years old. My addiction was for 15 years. Ended up going to prison. And when I went to prison, I had told myself that I didn't want to live that way anymore, that I was going to do everything that I could to try to change my life. From the guys that I dated to the things, the neighborhoods that I kicked it in or whatever. And so I took advantage of everything prison had to offer, classes, college, whatever I can do there to better myself. And so when I got out, I was living in a halfway house and met my husband. Well, met my now husband. And that was back in 2009. And so I met my husband, and it's funny because I told one of my friends in prison that when I got out that I was going to meet a white guy and marry a white guy. And she was like, "You're crazy." And of course I met my husband, and he's a white guy. And we were doing really well. I got my daughter back. We were, we worked, we had an apartment. He taught me how to pay bills, be responsible, grocery shop. I never knew any of those things. I mean, I knew how to take care of myself, but not to the extent of having our own place and knowing how to take care of our own home. And so we got my daughter back. We were doing really well for about 5 years. We were both in recovery, and we ended up relapsing. And so in our relapse, we obviously lost our home. We had just gotten a house, lost it. We had, lost our cars. We almost lost our marriage. We both parted ways during the relapse, and I kind of did my own thing, and he was doing his own thing. And then I lost my grandma. And then, so in September 2014, I lost my grandma. And during this time I was living in Arizona. And so my family called me, and said, your grandma's funeral's coming up. They knew something was wrong because my husband was kind of blasting it all over Facebook, and calling my family and telling them that I was on drugs and all that stuff. And of course they were asking me. And at that time I was lying. And so when I lost my grandma, I finally got honest with them because, I was going to go to the funeral, and they definitely would have known that something was wrong when I showed up. And so I went to the funeral and flew back to California to go to the funeral. And my family only bought me a one-way ticket. And so I flew out for the funeral, and I literally got there on a Sunday. Monday was the wake, Tuesday was the funeral. And then Wednesday, my family literally sat me down and was like, "Look, you need help. And either you can get the help and we'll support you along the way, or we can put you back on a plane back to Arizona and we're just done." And so of course I chose to get help. And at that time, me and my husband were still trying to decide if we wanted to get a divorce, what we were going to do. And I just remember telling him, well, I have to go to a program. That's the options my family have given me, have gave me, and I'm choosing to go to a program. And so I said, I'm going to find a program. And if by the time I'm done with it, if you haven't helped yourself, then we just can't be together.
So was he still active in addiction during this period? Had he relapsed? Okay, got you.
Yes. And so I told him that we had to do something. Either we were going to make it work or we weren't. And so he actually suggested teen challenge. He said, why don't you see if there's a teen challenge where you're at? Because I'm already back in California and he's still in Arizona. And so I looked it up and found a teen challenge, and about an hour from my dad's house. And um, my aunt actually made the call for me and got everything set up for me to go. And then once I did my interview with them, they said, hey, we have a family center here if your husband wants to come through the program with you. And I remember telling my aunt that, and my aunt was just kind of like, look, we're just trying to get you right now. If he wants to get help, he'll go get the help. But I ended up telling him and said, look, if this is what you want to do, we have a family center we can go to and be together. And so I checked in, and then 5 days later my husband showed up.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. So I'm curious on, you mentioned like, addiction prior to prison, right? Prior to jail, and then getting out and really doing well for a while. Like, so prior to jail, like all these years later, have you, unpacked what led to your use initially? Like, kind of dealing with the meth, you said meth addiction. And so is it just part of the environment, or was there anything that kind of, spurred that on in your life way back when?
Well, I grew up with deaf parents, and so life to me was already different than everybody else's. And so, but to me, my life was good growing up. My dad struggled with addiction my whole life, and I had no clue. I just remember my mom always being the nurturing mother, the mother that always went to school events, sport events. She did everything with me and my brothers, and so I went to the same school from kindergarten to sixth grade. I think things started to change for me when I started to go into junior high, because a lot of my friends from kindergarten to sixth grade started to move away. So I had to find a new set of friends. And I already kind of felt odd. I was the short, fat kid that nobody really wanted to hang out with. So I had my little set of friends. And so when going into seventh grade, it was hard. And so I met new friends, and with those friends, I started smoking weed a little and drinking. And then my parents decided to split up after 19 years of marriage. And when that happened, that kind of just unraveled everything. Um, I was 13 years old. My mom left my dad after 19 years and got with a 16-year-old boy, and they were together for almost 7 years. And when my mom moved us away with him, he introduced me to meth. And it was the summer of seventh grade going into the eighth grade. And then from that point on, that first time I tried it, it was a wrap after that.
Yeah, yeah, especially at that age. That's about. I started in eighth grade as well when I did math back in my life, and man, it was one time. And sometimes I think sometimes the younger folks, when you say that to them, they think you're messing with them. It's like, I promise, I am not hyping this up. It literally was the first hit. Like, yeah, yeah. So then the jail period in jail, right? You've started to put some of the pieces back in place, but so when did you meet Jesus on this journey, right? Was it prior to jail? Did you have an on again, off again relationship with God, or did that not happen until teen
I remember Jesus when I used to go to church with my grandma. Um, I still, and my parents used to send me to Awana when I was little. But I still don't think then I really made a connection. I was really young, and Awana was just a place I would go and repeat the same Bible scripture every week and get me a little prize for saying a scripture. I don't think I really understood it, but once I got out of prison and met my husband, he started taking me to church. And and then that's when I started to realize like who God was, who Jesus was. I still at that point though did not know about having a relationship with him until I got to Teen Challenge.
Yeah. And so that would be that part where you guys you knew about Jesus, you were kind of hanging doing the church thing, and what led up to the relapse, right, for you guys? You said that things were seemed to be going well, life was moving in the right direction, you're married and things are working, and then this relapse and things start to unravel for you guys. Do you remember what led up to that?
Yeah, just the small compromises, thinking you can have a drink just on the weekends or just it started with my husband at first with him smoking weed. And then the crowd of people that we started to hang out with started to shift a little bit. And also the place that I worked at for almost 5 years, we worked right next to a bar, and that's where a lot of people that I worked with would hang out at. And so of course wanting to fit in, that's where I hung out with them. And so it started with drinking occasionally, and then it just kind of progressed from there.
So the little foxes really do spoil the vine, right? Like, and so that started to fall apart, and you ended up in this family center. And so tell us a little bit about your encounter, like the pivotal moment. You said you made that distinction there between knowing about Jesus and entering into a relationship with him. And so, what was different for you? Like, you guys end up at TC, and how did you uncover that, the value and the benefit of that relationship with Christ?
The curriculum and the things that we learned there, and the different type of churches we went to out there. Because when I was going to church with my husband, it was a Southern Baptist church. So it was definitely what I was exposed to at Teen Challenge was definitely extremely different than a Baptist church. A lot of the churches we went to were AG churches or Pentecostal churches. And so I was exposed to a lot of different things going through Teen Challenge, and was taught differently. And so, and then also a lot of the curriculum and the having the Bible reading and all the stuff that we had to do at the program also opened my eyes to saying, oh, okay, well, this goes deeper than just knowing him, that he is here for me and that I am chosen and I am loved. And it went deeper than that. And so I started to go on that journey of, knowing who I am in him.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. You just hear a lot. I just find it interesting hearing in your story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like there was just this like almost refining process that the Lord was taking, this journey He was taking you on as He was discipling you. And you hear some people talk about these, divine moments, revelatory moments, where it's just like, Saul getting knocked off the horse, if you will. And what I'm hearing from you is it's like it wasn't necessarily the I've been knocked off the horse moment, but it was really God taking you in His hands and just starting to refine you and lead you into relationship. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, for sure. My grandmother prayed for me my whole entire life. And so when I look back at my life and where I've come from or where I've been and the things that I've been through to where I am now, I definitely understand that that was the hand of God on me the whole entire time. Because there was many moments where I should have died or been killed or could have been killed or seriously injured. And I wasn't. And so when I look back, and there's lots of things too with my children that I didn't understand that I understand now that I didn't see then. Then I was like, I need to make my case. I need to prove my point. Their mother, not them. And so I felt like I had to fight these things. But even though I didn't know what was going on at the time, God did.
Yeah. So can I ask you about your kids? How many kids do you guys have? And part of this journey, I mean, do you mind bringing us in a little bit? Were the children around during some of this?
I have two children, not with my husband. They're both from before I met him. I don't have any kids with my husband, but my daughter I had at 21. My addiction was, I guess I shouldn't say my addiction was, my addiction did mean more to me at that time than caring for her. So my mother took her and raised her. And then I had a son while I was in county jail. Um, it was funny though because I had went to jail literally 4 days prior, and the judge let me out because I was pregnant and I was crying and I was like, please, I can't have my baby here. 4 days later, got arrested again. Um, had to go in, and the judge was like, I'm not letting you out this time. It looks like you're having your baby here. And I'll never forget that moment of, going to the hospital, have this child being shackled by the ankle to the bed, and having the officer sitting outside of a glass window watching. And then coming out of, I had a cesarean, so coming out of recovery and asking to see my child, and I was told no. So I never got to see my baby. And then that's a whole nother story in itself with what happened with my son. It's just, a family agreed to take him until I got out of jail. She only brought him to see me one time, but every week they were faithful with putting money on my books. We talked, we agreed that when I got out, we were gonna, she said I can stay with her temporarily until I can figure life out and what I was gonna do. And so the day before, the week I was about to get out, I had called her and said, hey, I thought you were supposed to bring the baby today. And she said, oh, he's sick. And so we can't come. And then she said, how about Thursday? And I said, well, I get out Thursday. And she said, oh, so soon. And that kind of took me back because you knew, like, we've talked about this. And the day I got out, their number was disconnected. And that started a whole nother journey of searching and looking and finally finding them when he was 6 years old.
Yeah, wow. So where do you have both your children now?
No, the family that has my son, I allowed them to adopt him. That was a whole nother journey. When I found them at 6 years old, we went, started visitation. He has Down syndrome. He had trisomy 9q, where he was born with an extra chromosome. So not that I didn't want to take care of him, but this family uprooted their whole entire life to care for him, and they loved him so much. And to ask me if they can adopt him, how was I going to deny them that? And so they have him. He's 17, and my daughter lives downtown Houston with her boyfriend. She's 21. I got her back when she was 7.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And then so she's 21, that's not far from you guys, right? You're
Yeah,
in Texas, right?
yeah.
Man, that's phenomenal. And so, yeah, so tell us the journey to serve in ministry, like you went through this process at the family center and ended up staying on staff for Teen Challenge for 6 years, you mentioned, and now Project Hope for 3 years. So how did the Lord call you to ministry? I mean, out of all of this, I would love to hear that because, yeah, I see the smile. I think there's a great story coming with this.
Most people would think you're insane, but or think I'm insane. As soon as I heard about an internship with Teen Challenge, I was literally probably not even 30 days in. And I was like, oh, I'm doing an internship. And everybody was like, yeah, right. I remember telling my husband, because he was at the men's center, and I was like, I'm going to stay and do an internship. And he's like, whoa, 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 let's slow down. Let's do this year and then let's figure it out. And I was just adamant. When my year was done, I was going to stay and do an internship. And I did. We stayed and did an internship. We stayed, and then I did my staff internship, and then I became staff. And I did that for a while. My husband decided to leave at some point in our program. I think we were like 3 or 4 years in. My husband was kind of like, I'm done with ministry. I think it's time to get back to real life. And at that point it was hard for me too, because it's like, do I follow my husband because he's the head of the household, and if he says or feels that it's time to go, do we go? And let me pack up myself, my daughter, and everybody, and we leave, or do I stay and just keep doing what I'm doing? And I decided to stay. And he left for about 8 months, relapsed on heroin, never done heroin a day in his life. And so he ended up coming back 8 months later and doing a restoration. But during that time he was gone, I used to try to hit him below the belt every single time and just make it so miserable for him because he left. And then one day, all of a sudden, God was like, stop. You need to stop. And I just said, you know what, God, I'm sorry. I surrender him. I surrender this marriage. If we were meant to be together, you'll bring him back. And if you don't, then I'm going to be okay. Because there was a point in time where I would say that I wouldn't be able to live without him. I wouldn't know what to do without my husband. And in that time that he was gone, God showed me, like, yes, you can live. You're still breathing right now and he's gone. And so I learned a lot about myself at that time, because God was showing me that I didn't give you a husband to put up here. I gave you a husband to be next to you and for you guys to be together and do things side by side. I'm I'm supposed to be the one that's up here. And so he taught me a lot in in those 8 months, that I am strong, I am capable. These were things that I knew, but it was just like a reassurance. You are able to do these things. With me, you can do anything.
Just hearing you say that and jumping back to you talking about your story, seventh and eighth grade, searching for that identity, right? And kind of that being the journey that began the addiction. All these years later, through everything you walk through, God kind of giving you that revelation of identity while you're on staff at Teen Challenge. And I'm sure there had been some addressing of it, prior, because you do that at TC, but to kind of get that, like, man, that's profound. Is there anything more you've got to speak to that? I mean, am I way off base here? Like,
No, it's good. You're absolutely right. Because during my addiction in my younger years, for that 15 years, I was like a chameleon. I adapted to the situation, or I changed who I was to be who I thought you wanted me to be, or I changed myself to be who I needed to be to get what I needed. And to care for myself, to make sure I had a place to stay, drugs, whatever the case may be. I made sure I was able to adapt to every situation. So I was just out there never being me. And so during that time, I was just like, man, I was just in tears all the time during that time my husband left, because God's just so good. Like like you said, we did learn these things. I did work through some stuff in Teen Challenge. I had a counselor. I worked through stuff, but there were still just pieces that I felt like were missing. And in that moment, I feel like God showed me and filled those pieces. Not to say I don't still struggle today with insecurities or whatever the case may be, but it's still just a powerful moment that I remember, um, that knowing that, God, you are real, and I know who I am now.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I'll never forget when I met my now wife when we were first dating. And she says that she didn't say it exactly like this, but this was the context. And she almost said to the point where, like, we were trying to figure out this whole dating. I'm post teen challenge at this point. She's a Bible school graduate, never touched drugs. I'm a former meth addict. And I remember her saying something to the effect of, like, I don't need you to complete me, and like I'm a whole person, like 100%. And like I got offended at first. I'm like, I'm thinking Jerry Maguire, you complete me, in our conversations. And she's like, no, we're bringing our whole selves to this marriage, 100% of who we are. And God began to really work with me on that end. Just interesting that to hear that point about marriage, of like just, yeah, illustration you gave, it's that mutual submission to one another, that side by side, versus, yeah, it's so good. It's so powerful.
I think too, for when he had to come back and do restoration, that was a pivotal moment for him, because I think when we went through the program together, we were constantly worried about each other and trying to fix each other and carry each other's burdens and do all this and that. So and then also had my daughter with us, our daughter, and just and worrying about her and her needs and the things that she went through and what she's seen and what she experienced during this relapse, and just in her life in general, not being with me, not being raised by me, and all this other stuff. And so that moment that he had to come back and do a restoration, it was a moment for him to kind of figure out who he was as well. So now he's walking through the restoration part by himself. I kept my distance to let him do his thing, and so that he can work through the issues that he's been needing to work on, but was so focused on me that he never did. And so that was a really changing point for him as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's that part of like Galatians 6:1 where Paul talks about, right? Like, if any of you's caught in sin, you who are spiritual, restore one another gently. And I think sometimes like we gloss go past that, you who are spiritual, right? Like restore. And so there's the connotation there of maturity and growth. And from a place of maturity, we're restoring other people gently. And so early on in this recovery thing, and I'm sure you've seen it over all these years of Teen Challenge. It's like we want to run out and fix and rescue everybody else. And it's like, no, there's a season for that, but let's get spiritual first. Then we can go work on restoring other people, you
Right,
know?
for
Yeah,
sure.
no, yeah, it's so good. So this season of life that you're in now, you are moved on from TC in California. You're now program directing Project Hope Saving Grace. Saving Grace is the women's branch, and I've talked to Jeff several times. Man,
I love
Jeff,
him.
he's been out to our center back in the day. Pastor Jeff is awesome. So, how did you end up in Texas directing a women's program now?
Well, before leaving TC, I went to college and got my bachelor's in business management.
Nice,
And
congrats, that's awesome.
yeah, thank you. And did a few other things. And then the director that was directing the TC that when I was there ended up leaving and moving. Him and his family moved on, and they went to TC in Ohio for a little bit, and then they came on um, as directors of the Project Hope in Arkansas. And so they were needing someone for Texas, and they asked him if he knew anybody that would be qualified for the position, and he suggested me. And so, of course, I took the interview and did what I needed to do. And then my husband and daughter were ready to go to Texas before I was. But it was funny because prior to this being asked, my husband and I were like, okay, we're never going to be able to buy a house in California. It's so expensive. And so we were thinking of places to relocate eventually one day. And so he had said Colorado because that's where he's from. And I'm like, I don't really want to deal with snow. And so we kept going back and forth with different things. And I said, why don't we go to Texas? And he's like, really? And so he's like, I've been looking at houses in Texas and they look reasonable. And so I was like, all right. And we kind of just left it there. We never, we didn't pursue anything. We just kind of left it alone. And literally, like a week or two later, I was called and asked if I wanted this position in Texas.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So working your role as program director, what does that look like in the scope of project? I mean, Saving Grace.
I do a lot of administrative work, um, making sure schedules are running smoothly. I put the schedules together. I do a lot of things. I do a lot of their shopping for the house, grocery shopping, supply shopping, scheduling, pop log, which is just keeping how many students we have and making sure those that's sent out every week. I send out random emails. I do a lot of things. I work with the women. I love the women. I hang out with them all the time. And
So what's your drive in doing it? Right. I mean, obviously we've heard your story, but like, is there just something like a reoccurring theme, or if you had like a personal vision statement in regards to doing this work? Because recovery ministry work is not easy, right? It's not the easiest to do. But sorry, you're ready to answer. So go ahead.
that is, I absolutely love to serve. You will find me at events. You will find me jumping in anytime a hand is needed. I love to serve. So I love to serve these women. I like to give them hope that if my marriage can be restored, if my child can be given back to me, if I can go through college at 30, almost 40, 30 something, almost 40 years old and get a degree. My husband and I in May just bought our first house. And so it's like, if I can do it and if God did it for me, he can do it for you. And so I love to be able to give these women encouragement. I want them to see that it is possible, that they are not too far gone, that they can't be chosen, loved, brought back, restored, redeemed, because I've been through a lot too, and I'm here. I'm still here.
That's so good. How has that contributed to your freedom this time around? The difference of serving the internship and doing the ministry route, rather than going back out and trying to figure life out outside of. I mean, have you noticed the difference between this season and that season, and how that's helped?
Um, yes. I mean, obviously, ministry can be very overwhelming. You stay very busy 24/7. And I just feel like being here, this overwhelming busyness and continuing to stay busy feels a lot different than being busy not in ministry. Not in ministry. I was very frustrated at times, just felt overwhelmed. There was days I wanted to give up. Not that I don't have those days now, but those days for some reason just feel a whole lot different because I feel like my walk with God now is a whole lot different than when I was out in the world or the real world, trying to make it, because then I wasn't plugged in. I was not plugged in. So before it was just church on Sunday and that's what we did. Now I stay plugged in with life groups, obviously church, I do different things now. And so that's how I feel my walk is different now compared to before.
Yeah, there's that dichotomy, and I wrote a mini blog, mini Facebook. Most of my Facebook posts are like mini blogs. I don't write a few words, so I don't have Twitter. But the difference, the dichotomy between being poured out and burnt out, right? And that mindset you talk, I'm connected to the source consistently, so there's always a flow, and that's what I'm hearing you describing. Like, I don't mind being busy, I don't mind running, because I've got an endless source flowing through me through Jesus. And like, so I am pouring myself out, versus running at my wits end and feeling burnt out all the time. Yeah. So Jessica, let me ask you a question as we kind of come to an end. And if you could go back to that season of life, and so I have behind me the light, that's my Lego DeLorean from the Back to the Future, one of my favorite movie trilogies of all times. But if you could hop in a DeLorean and go back to the past, to the season of life where you're facing down, you've just gone through this relapse, you're facing down teen challenge, you got all these insurmountable odds in front of you, marriage, kids, everything facing you down. And you could give Jessica just one piece of advice, having the experience you have now, giving Jessica that advice back then. Do you know what that would be all these years later?
Don't do drugs. No.
That's good.
I don't think so.
No,
No.
no, I'm not asking if you would change anything. So if you could give yourself one piece of it, there's nothing you could tell her.
Nope. Because that one piece of advice could change the whole entire route that I was on. If I That one piece of advice could have led to a change and I could have went a totally completely different route. And so, like my aunt says sometimes, like she wished she would have helped me. She knew what I was in. She knew that I was in a mess and wished she would have helped me back then. And I told her, first of all, I probably wouldn't have wanted your help. I was young and I was living life. To me, that I was having a good time. And so I told her, I said, for once, I probably wouldn't have took your help. And two, if I would have allowed you to do that, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am today.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
so any piece of advice I could have gave myself back then could have changed my whole course of life, and I wouldn't be, and it could have been better. I could be a millionaire living in some big house on a hill, who knows. But that's not the life I want. I absolutely love the life that I have right now. And I don't regret anything that I've gone through. Has bad things happened? Yes. Have I done bad things? Yes. But I still wouldn't change it for anything, because it brought me to where I am today. It brought me into a relationship with God. It brought me into a ministry that I love working at and serving at. I wouldn't I wouldn't change that or say anything different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. I like to ask that question because sometimes it gives perspective, and I appreciate the way you answered that because it always see hearing those differences, and you're trying to look back and see like, man, what would I have told me being mature, being where I'm at now, and hearing your response, like, nah, it was painful, but I'm confident in where I am now. Like this has been God's journey and God's path. That's such a powerful response. So Jessica, if somebody is looking for help and there's a female that is reaching out and looking for help, how can they connect with you guys at Saving Grace to be able to get some help?
They can find us on Facebook. It's called Grace. I think it's Grace Home. Um, Let me look that up just to make sure. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. And we'll put the link in the description box below.
Um, I think we've updated the page. Saving Grace Dash Texas is our Facebook. And then you can always go to our website too. I think I gave it to you. It's the www.savinggracewh.com.
I think I know the answer to this, but I enjoyed asking just Jeff this question, and so I'm going to ask you the same thing because I'm assuming it's similar at Project Hope. How hard is it for me to get into the program there if I need help? Well, I can't go in, but obviously, for women to get help.
It's not hard at all. You just call and do an interview process, and talk to our intake coordinator. And I mean, the only thing that really um, turns someone away, which we don't really often, is just certain types of medication that we don't accept here. But other than that, we work with everybody the best that we can to
Yeah.
get them in. And we have 5 homes. We have 5 women homes now and 3 men's locations. So if we don't have an bed in Texas, there we go, open bed in Texas, we definitely locate you at one of our other centers that does have an open bed. Willing to go to a different state.
Yeah, Project Hope and Saving Grace are doing phenomenal work. Great programs. If you need help, the comments in the description, I'll put both links to both the men's and the women's center down in the description. Well, Jessica, thanks so much for jumping on. I think we froze up again, but that's all right. I can edit and clean some of this up at the end. But I do appreciate you jumping on and chatting